As humans, it's easy to always point at the other and say, hey, these people are the problem. It goes down to the biologic tribalism of early human societies. The extremists are the anomaly. That's why we call them extremists. They are extreme. What all of these communities have in common is their belief that someone else is out to get them and they are better than someone else. Hi, my name is Bjorn Ihler. I'm an expert on countering radicalization to violent extremism, work in counter-extremism, counter-terrorism. Today I'll be reading some comments from the internet and react to those, so that should be exciting.
Deep Extra.
Here I am listening to you again in 2023 while the wave of anti-diversity, anti-immigrants storms Europe. I worry but still hope. Cheers. I think first of all, it's great that you still have hope. The last decade has been wild. I think everyone says that they are living in interesting times in history with escalating conflicts in Europe, in the Middle East, etc. It's difficult sometimes to be hopeful, but I remain hopeful. I still have faith in humanity and our ability to reconcile, to come together and solve some of these challenges. The extremists are the anomaly. That's why we call them extremists. They are extreme. In response to mass protests, like we saw after the attack in Southport, communities really show their resilience and largely come together and try to find ways of dealing with what happened, but also dealing with what happened in ways that don't escalate division, stand up against hatred, stand up against division, and stand for unity. One of the unique things in Southport as well, I lived in Liverpool for my bachelor's, which is not too far away, and kind of the Merseyside region as well, is that because of its history as kind of a shipping area, and it's always had a lot of cultural diversity. There's a reason the Beatles were able to grow up in Liverpool, and building on the resilience that exists in that diversity as well, I think was important in kind of the local reactions to that, but also important across the British Isles. It's, however, important not to view the reactions to the tragedy in Southport in isolation. It ties into protests we've seen against migration centres in both the UK and in Ireland in particular. And so understanding that this escalation was drastic and dramatic, but also that it was tied to a longer context, an international context, where these things happen is important. Waiting for you to self-deflect and pop your own echo-chambered lib bubble. Treating the inhumane behavior with humane ideology is foolhardy. You suffer the same disease as the extremists and extreme belief system. To label jihadists far-right is disingenuous and abhorrent. All right, we have some opposition here, which is what we're met with a lot of the time. This really speaks to my belief in humanity and sure, if you don't believe in that, then that will look extreme potentially. I again believe that most people are with me, and we see that repeatedly after larger incidents, but also just in daily life. We do live in diverse societies, all of us. All around the globe, we have a diversity of opinion, of life experiences, of identities, and that is one of the things that gives us as societies strength. We are able to meet people who experience the world differently from us and learn from that. And that's how we grow and evolve as people and as societies. And so I think that's kind of at the heart of what I'm working for, to maintain our ability to evolve as humans and as a society. I tend to view extremism as the violent denial of diversity, irrespective of where their ideology comes from. I don't really care about the far left, far right, jihadists, other religious communities, because one of the things we're seeing is that the ideology that's people tied to their extremism is less important than their sense of supremacy and victimhood from the world at large. What all of these communities have in common is their belief that like someone else is out to get them and that they are better than someone else. And so whether it's jihadists that are trying to enforce conformity in like a specific belief system within the Islamic faith, like that's very small minorities within like the 1.8 or so billion Muslims in the world, right? And so that is one component, but also like the far right believing that like the white race is supreme or that like Christian identity is supreme, etc. Like they want to also enforce conformity within societies, whether that's racial or religious or follow other lines of identity. All I'm saying is, hey, they have a lot in common. The rootings of how they operate in this world is very similar. And the ways in which we can fight back against that is very similar in kind of the celebration of our diverse societies and our acknowledgement of the inherent value of that.
Why do you think people are so afraid of diversity and kind of see that as such a threat to their beliefs, to their culture, traditions?
Again, it kind of falls into the whole feeling threatened perspective. Quite a lot of us are nervous about new things, and that's natural. Like you can approach that with fear or you can approach it with curiosity. I tend to go for curiosity and try to learn more. And you know, often that leads to beautiful experiences. Sometimes it leads to painful experiences. You know, it goes down to like the biologic tribalism of like early human societies. But as kind of cognizant human beings, we're also able to like challenge ourselves when we are operating with fear and like try to understand like, why am I afraid of this? And is this a rational feeling or is it an irrational reaction? The government/police need to conduct more scrutiny on mosques and Islamic faith schools to stop radicalization. So I think we see a lot of fear and hatred of Muslims, especially in countries and in areas where Muslims are a minority. I don't at all believe that's the way of dealing with radicalization is for the police to necessarily conduct more scrutiny of mosques and Islamic faith schools. Like understanding that, like, yes, there are people within Muslim communities who are radicalizing and being radicalized is one element, but also understanding that like the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful people who just want to, you know, live their lives, and understanding that mosques and faith schools for many people are a place of finding safety, finding community, finding things that are helpful in their lives. And yes, sometimes those things can be exploited by people who are radicalizing, but also the vast majority of the time, those places are not. Probably not easy to be a Muslim reading even ideas like this. You know, racism is a thing, Islamophobia is a thing. Like people are being exposed to hatred on a daily basis and fear on a daily basis. That's not a way to deal with people, and definitely not a way to deal with radicalization. At the same time, also understanding that both mosques and Islamic faith centers have been attacked by extremists is really important. I work for a European company in the US. There are several Swedes in my office. They've told me how bad things are in Sweden with crime from immigrants. It's a big narrative about like Sweden happening in the rest of the world, and some of that is driven by just like the nature of Swedish politics, which has kind of a fairly large far-right component of it. I live in Sweden. Sweden is enormously safe for the vast majority of people. Like many other countries, Sweden also has organized crime. Some of that is within migrant communities, some of that is not within migrant communities. Understanding that that is driven by many factors, like socioeconomic factors, driven by the way in which our cities are designed, driven by how we deal with different kind of socioeconomic groups within our societies, etc., is more helpful than just like labeling Sweden as particularly dangerous or saying that things are particularly bad. How do we find solutions and how do we progress? So I think as humans, it's easy to always point at the other and like say, hey, these people are the problem. And right now in Europe, like the easy targets for that are immigrants. It's easy to like, hey, those people are the problem. rather than recognizing that we as a society as a whole are here and we need to figure out how to live with that. Challenging that is something we all kind of have a responsibility almost, I think, for doing, and understanding these are diverse groups in and of themselves, and learning about each other with curiosity rather than with fear again is kind of the main component of how to build some sort of cohesive society which is accepting of internal diversity. I think it's worth kind of noting that Europe always had crime. Europe also always had immigration, but we used to point to other groups and say these are the problem. One of the things that I've seen in Oslo, for instance, is migration to Norway kind of largely started in the 70s. Prior to that, the same kind of areas of the city were struggling with addiction problems, struggling with domestic abuse, struggling with social issues and crime. And so there's kind of a geographic component to these are the areas with relatively cheap housing where people who haven't had kind of the generational ability to establish themselves, establish generational wealth. These are the areas where those people end up, and those areas do have socioeconomic issues, including organized crime. They were struggling with that before migration really became a thing in Norway, and so it's kind of just the population changes in those areas and people grow out of those areas. And right now it's we can point easily at this large group with many different experiences and say we approach that with fear, but we can also say, hey, let's solve our socioeconomic issues, let's solve our housing policy, let's figure out how to build societies in which people don't need to or feel the need to kind of seek out organized crime communities. Try to find ways of building communal and societal resilience against that, rather than just pointing at a group and say those are the bad guys.